Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a PS2 game, and that happens to be Azumi. And this is a game that is based after a manga series with the same name, written by Yu Koyama, and that original manga run was 1994 to 2008 with 48 volumes. That's quite a bit. And just so you know, I actually did manage to read the first couple volumes of it just to get a first impression, and I gotta say, from what I read of it, it was actually really damn good. Now, I don't want to go too in-depth about the story here, but I will sum up and say that, the story is all about this female ninja girl named Azumi, and all she knows about life is just killing things. She never learned how to do, like, any other basic things that humans normally do. So pretty much the whole beginning part of the story is that she goes through a lot of training and then eventually has to assassinate a bunch of people within the Toyotomi clan. And of course, there's a lot more other interesting things that go on within all this, but yeah, I don't want to be here forever, as you did click on this to learn about the game, not the manga, and besides, I didn't even read the whole thing. Although I would love to read the whole thing, as I did really enjoy what I read of this, but right now, currently, I don't have a good, comfortable way of reading things digitally. But if one of these manga publishing companies, such as Viz or Seven Seas or whoever out there, decided to release a physical release of this over here, then I would gladly buy all that shit. But before moving on to the video game, I should also quickly mention that there's actually 2 live-action films that are also based after the manga, but yet there is no anime made of it. So yeah, it's a manga, films, video game, even a stage play, and yeah, no anime. Isn't that interesting? So with that all the way, the game was developed by Gargoyle Mechanics and was published by ESP Software, and it came out in the year 2005. But weirdly enough, a year later, the game was re-released under the Simple 2000 series, Volume 32. Yeah, not sure how that happened, but damn. So this is technically a Simple series game. Oh joy. And as you would expect, the game is an action beat-em-up hack-and-slash game. And let's get moving on and start talking about the game's story. And while I kinda already went over what you needed to know with the manga, and from what I was able to tell from here, I did not recognize any of this stuff from the manga, so there's a chance that either this is all just made up, or it's in the manga, but it's all stuff that happens way later that I didn't get a chance to see. But there's really not much story within this game, and of course it's Japan only, so unless you can read all this text that you see, you're probably gonna skip over it anyways, so you don't gotta worry too much about it. So let's get moving on to what this game is mainly focused on, the gameplay. So before every mission, you get to look at a map, and then you get to look at all the different equipment items you get to equip to yourself. You got cosmetic ones, and ones that do affect your stats. And the main objectives are pretty simple and easy to understand, even if you can't read Japanese. It's mostly just trying to get to the end of the level, or just trying to kill everything in sight. And you have 3 different attack styles that you can play around with, and they're represented in different colors, so you got the green, the blue, and the red. So the green one allows you to attack super quickly, but it does have the weakest amount of power, but I do find that one is to be the most useful to me because you can stagger most enemies and just beat the shit out of them really quickly. And then the blue one is slower, and I mean really slower, but it is a bit stronger than the green one. But the main thing about the blue one is that it does seem to be more of a defensive stance, because that one allows you to do more counters with, and I'll explain the whole counter function in this game in a little bit. And as for the red one, this one is the strongest one, and you can knock back enemies with it easily, but your character does bounce around all over the place. And I do feel like that her timing from jumping to attacking does feel a little bit on the slower side. So those are the 3 different attack stances that you have. Now as for the counter meter, that blue bar at the bottom, yes, that's what that's for. Basically that tells you how many times you can counter, cause the thing is that the countering in this game is so stupidly easy that you don't even have to try. You literally just hold the guard button, and as soon as something attacks you, you just automatically kill them. You don't gotta worry about like timing your parrying or any that kind of shit. But the drawback is that you can't spam it all the time, so therefore that's why they make a counter meter. And like I was saying earlier, the blue stance takes up the least amount of it, where if you try countering with the green or the red, it takes up a lot more percentage. And you have a limited amount of items to throw at people, such as the kunais and the bombs, and after every mission, you do restock after. And another thing I should also mention about the different colors of different attacks that you can do is that sometimes you'll see enemies with a green, a blue, or red circle over their head. If you kill those enemies with the same colored stance, then you get to go into an overtime mode, and during this time, everything that you hit will die in one shot. And if you're quick enough, the time can be extended if you kill another enemy that also happens to be killed by the same matching color. So you can kind of keep a little bit of a chain going by killing a bunch of enemies in one shot. And I won't lie, I do think it is a pretty fun mechanic in a game like this. So now let's get moving on and start talking about the game's controls, and oh boy. So let's go over the button layout first. So X is to jump, square is to attack, triangle is to throw the kunais, and circle is to throw the bombs. L2 and R2 allows you to change the different colored stances. Holding R1 allows you to do the counter move, and if you hold down that button while you move, then you can roll around and dodge. And L1 makes the camera point towards what's in front of you. And I don't think I need to explain how you move around in the game, but yes, if you really wanted to, you can move around with a D-pad. And as for the right analog stick, you would expect that it would move the camera around, but nope, it doesn't do anything in this game. So the only camera control you have is L1, and yes, the camera work in this game is pretty terrible. Yeah, there's been plenty of times where I got hit by something because the camera just did not show what I was being hit by, or everything was just way too close up and I just couldn't see shit. And keep in mind too, this is a game made in 2005, not 1995, where, you know, the PS1 controller at that time didn't even have two analog sticks, it was just a dog bone controller. But this game did not come out early on in the PS1's life cycle, so the fact that this game doesn't have camera control with the right analog stick is just baffling. But as for the controls themselves, how do they feel? Do they at least feel okay? Do they feel at least a little bit better than what I just said? No, not really. Actually, I would say that the controls in this game feels like you're trying to play the game with a single particular butt cheek. So in other words, it's ass. And really what I'm talking about is really with the attacking in this game. Everything else is fine, or controls okay enough, even though I do find that the walking speed in this game does feel a little bit on the stiffer side. But the attacks in this game, they just do not feel good at all. Not only do the attacks also feel really stiff, but they also do feel kind of delayed too. And the one thing that really annoys me the most is that in the red stance, whenever you bounce around as her, it's really hard to control. And a lot of the times you just kind of like just attack into nothing. And even if you do try to point towards where the enemies are, it still feels like a struggle just to try to get it right. So the red stance, as powerful as it is, unfortunately, it's really hard to control. And as like I said about the blue stance, the attack animation is so freaking slow and it leaves you wide open that it's almost unreliable. The only reason people would even bother going into the blue stance is just so they can abuse the counter meter with it. And the green stance is probably the most playable one. It's still not good, it still feels really stiff. Also, your attack range on that stance is also kind of weird to get used to as well, but outside of this though, compared to the other two stances, it's definitely the most playable one, but even at that, it still isn't anything good. So yeah, that pretty much sums up the controls, is that the camera work and the way how the attacking works are pretty bad. Now let's get moving on and start talking about the other things, like the graphics. And the graphics in this game, for 2005 standards on PS2, yeah, it's not great looking. Even for an anime-style game, I think there are so much better looking ones out there. But to be fair, given that this is sort of related to the Simple 2000 series, you kind of do have to expect that the graphics are not going to be on the same level as most big-budget games that came out in 2005. So without comparing it to the big boys, comparing it to the other Simple 2000 games that came out, yeah, it's passable. I mean, it does look way better than games like Eternal Quest. Like, that game just still looks like a piece of shit. But I think the main thing with this game's graphics is that there's just nothing too memorable about the way it looks. Like, the set pieces, like, yeah, as much as I do like some Japanese settings, I think here they're just kind of bland and not too memorable. Nothing really much sticks out to me. The only nice thing I will say about the graphics is that I do find that the way how they modeled the main character Azumi, I think they did a decent job making her in this game, because I really do love the art style within the original manga, and the way how they recreated her in a 3D form honestly doesn't look that bad. So yeah, this game managed to make one thing look pretty decent, but as for the rest, yeah, it's not very memorable at all. And as for the game's music, the music in this game is very fitting for the setting, and yeah, I'd say it's actually kind of decent, as again, it's nothing crazy memorable, but there is a couple tracks in the game I do remember hearing that were kind of cool sounding for this type of game. I also do like the way that the menu music sounds, so yeah, I would actually say that the music is decent. I wouldn't say it's hugely underrated or anything, but yeah, I think it's actually not a bad soundtrack. So now, if you want to go out and buy yourself a copy of this game, if you do have a way of playing a Japanese PS2 game, and if you really wanted to buy this shit, well, the cheapest I've seen it for was about $37, and the highest I've seen it for was about over $100. Yeah, I don't think we really need to go into why game prices these days are so astronomical, but the one thing I did do out of funsies was that I looked up to see exactly how much a complete manga set of Azumi would cost, and it was $246 around, and I gotta say, even though that may be a lot more money than paying for like a $100 PS2 game that sucks, at least you're paying for something that's actually really fucking good. So now, as for my overall thoughts on Azumi on PS2, well, I think you kinda already figured it out, but yeah, this game sucks. And it's a shame that it does suck, because not only is it based after a property that's cool, but also, there's a lot of mechanics in this game that are actually not bad at all. If the game didn't have such shit controls, this game could have actually been decent. Being able to switch different stances is always a cool thing. I mean, I like it in many other games that I've played. Also, having the whole idea of being able to go into overkill mode where you can just kill everything in one hit and at a time limit, but you can extend the time if you know, do a certain thing. Like, I think that's actually a pretty cool idea too. But all of this was ruined with bad controls and bad camera angles. And the weird thing is too, is that this game is hard, but it's not hard because it's like, you know, actually challenging. It's hard because the controls suck. But if the controls were a lot better, then the game probably would be really damn easy, because a lot of the stuff you gotta do is honestly not that hard at all. But even if this game did have decent controls, I'm sure some people would still point out at the fact that this game's level design is pretty lazy and is also very narrow hallway-esque, so very similar to Final Fantasy 13, which, you know, everybody loves that game, right? But all joking aside though, yeah, that would still be a problem within the game. And notice that I barely mentioned that when talking about this game, because the controls were just so bad that I barely paid attention to the fact that the level design were just narrow hallways. So I guess in this game, it was just one of those minor things that just bogs down a game that's already not good. So knowing all this, this is a game that I really struggle to recommend to anyone, really. I mean, the only people I think that would get the most out of it, and even then, they still probably wouldn't like it much, would be anyone that read through the whole manga and they really loved it, and they just want to see exactly what the game would be like. Because it is kind of interesting to see what the game would be like, but unfortunately, it's not very good. And to be honest, playing this game made me miss playing Sakura Wars 5 Episode 0. Yeah, that game I reviewed earlier this year that was also a hack and slash PS2 game. Yeah, that game does have its problems with jankness, but at least it was actually kind of fun and funny, and not only that, but I at least had, like, a decent time with it, despite it being a very mid-tier game. But this game, however, is just boring, frustrating, annoying, yeah, very annoying. And if it wasn't for the fact it was based after a cool series, I probably never would have bothered with it. But as much shit that I'm talking about with this game, still better than Shogun's Blade, though. So that'll take us to the end of this. So if you learned anything out of this one, is that the manga series is really good, and I'm sure the live-action movies are better than this. Hell, I'm pretty sure even the frickin' stage play is better than this shit. So, with that said, thanks for watching, commenting, and have yourselves a great day.